All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Why Read. I'm your host, Joanna from the channel Joanna. And on this discussion series, we like to begin with the why read question, which is another way of asking in a time with so many distractions, so many options of how to pass our time, what inspires us to pick up a book? And so today, joining me, I have the wonderful channel StoryToob, and this includes Carlos and Yolanda. So I'm so excited to welcome them here to the channel, and we'll go ahead and start with the why read question. So either one of you can start with this question.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
Thanks for having us on. Why read? Why read?
I think that's a great question.
Isn't it a great question?
Why read? Because I'm a little bit dumb and I want to get smarter. Maybe. I think I've always had a love for stories. Obviously, by the name of our channel, you might have put that together. And I have always found that, I guess, an understanding of people and how they behave that I've been interested in comes out through stories, to be honest. So I don't know, reading. I always tend to get the same things out of something that I read, and it always seems to either correlate or challenge my fundamental beliefs about people. So I guess that is a deeper answer. Well, that was a smart answer.
That's a very smart answer. Yeah, well done.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to, I make this question very open. So it doesn't, any answer is right. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just what's real and authentic to you. So beautiful answer though. I definitely will be asking you more about that to unpack that further.
Cool.
But first of all, we'll hear Yolanda's answer to that question too.
I think there's a couple of angles to it. Like there's the love of physical books. That just thinking in terms of loving stories, but stories can be consumed in so many different ways, and why books specifically, it's the physical object, and it's decorating your home with them, and then having, to me, it has always felt like, I love movies as well and TV shows, right? But when you watch a movie, especially nowadays when they're on streaming mainly, and you don't necessarily have like a DVD, you don't have a physical reminder of having watched that movie. So you watch it and then you talk about it. And if it's one of your all-time favorites, you'll remember it. But otherwise, you just stop talking about it, and it's just not really something you think about anymore. Whereas when you read a book, you spend so much time with it physically. First of all, this is obviously assuming that you're reading physically, but which is mostly what I do. And then you put it on the shelf, and that is kind of alive in a way. Like that story is just speaking to you every time you pass that shelf and you remember it. So I think it just makes that story extra vivid in my memory. And I like that reading then itself feels more active than watching something or listening to something, or even just like, even if watching a play or whatever, because you're picturing it in your imagination. So you are an active storyteller yourself within what you're getting from the author. And that's another deep answer.
No, it's wonderful. And I love that. I think it reminds me a little bit. I did have a video not too long ago. I think I received a comment from YouTube about it too. About reading formats, thoughts on reading formats. I can't remember my exact title of that video. But in that particular video, I think at one point I did address that I feel like the book on the shelf is symbolic, kind of like what you were just saying, Yolanda, that there's something about that is representing a memory or something specific for you. And it's not something I gave a lot of thought to before. You two have a gorgeous collection, by the way. I must say, to check out their bookshelves and their videos. They're stunning. So many books. Wow. For me, I've only been collecting books for the last few years, honestly. I collected books when I was much younger and then gave them all away, and then started using the library exclusively for a long time.
Yeah.
and just slowly have been starting to build a collection, but I feel like that's something that I've started to recognize as like, "Oh, that book over there." Now, I haven't read every book on my shelf, in full honesty, but I've read most of them, and there's something really special about knowing I went on that
Yeah.
journey and that journey.
Yeah.
So,
I
it's
have
like
always,
treasure.
I grew up in a family, my mother, my uncles, my grandparents, on the Spanish side, the Irish side, not so much. Um, that is just surrounded by books, physically. My mother has she has our whole my childhood home all cataloged. I don't know. There's probably like 6 or 7 thousand books in the home, and that's what I grew up being around. So it was always inevitable that I would read.
Mhm.
Um, I've had periods where I stop reading and I discover other things, mainly as a teenager or when I was in college, where I was reading too much for college, so I wasn't reading for pleasure that much. But I always come back to it because I don't know. It's Yeah, I like it.
That's wonderful, though.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or is
and
there
like
anything
I think, sorry, I think
Go ahead.
the physical uh how do I put this? I feel like my home would be naked if it didn't have a few books in it,
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't feel lived in. So yeah.
Yeah. That was how I was living for a while. But it is a comfort for sure.
Mm,
And yeah, I think those are beautiful thoughts on books and story. And I'd be curious too. I mean, I know you two read widely. That's something that I've really appreciated about your channel. I want to
cool.
hear a little background about you two because I feel like I don't know as much as I'd like. I did watch your BookTube newbie tag from back in
Mhm.
the day, and then another, I think your first video. When did
Yeah.
you start your channel, and would you mind sharing with us the story behind starting your channel?
So we started the channel in March. I think those two videos that you just mentioned are like terrible lighting and terrible sound. We're trying to figure it out.
We
Um,
still don't have good lighting. We'll just stop.
that's true. Yeah.
We're
But that's just Ireland. We can blame
Yeah.
Ireland. It's not good lighting. Um, we actually talked about starting a channel for ages, at least a year, if not longer,
Yeah.
just from almost instantly after we discovered booktube, and we're like, we talk about these things all the time, wouldn't it be so fun to get to talk to all these people about it? And because so often, like, I have always surrounded myself with people that read in my real life. Like, I went to college and I studied literature and I work in a bookshop, so like I've searched out the places where you'd find other people that love reading. um so sometimes I forget that a lot of people don't. And I
Mhm.
find it surprising when I'm reminded of that.
Yeah.
But I think there's always like a little bubble when you're talking to your friends and everybody's reading the same thing. And booktube was a different kind of bubble. So specifically fantasy is very popular on booktube, not so much with like most people that I would know in real life.
No people that I know in real life.
Yeah. So a big reason to start the channel was definitely getting to interact with the community and talking to people about books and about reading and doing like chats and that kind of thing. And but we also specifically wanted to make a point of talking about everything that
Yeah.
we like, and try to resist falling into the trap of feeling like you need to have read all the stuff that everybody's talking about.
Yep.
Like, neither of us has read Abercrombie yet, for example, which feels ludicrous saying that you love fantasy, and especially on Fantasy Booktube. I'm like, how have we not read Abercrombie? And there's this danger of getting into that trap of thinking, oh, I'm not allowed to talk about fantasy books if I haven't checked this list or whatever.
I have owned the first law since I was 14, and I still have not read it.
Wow.
And I'll tell you a funny story about that. I bought the first law because I thought it was historical fiction. And then when I found out at the time that it wasn't historical fiction, I was like, oh. So I left them there. Anyway,
How funny. That is
Yeah.
so funny.
But I think the thing is, yeah, we wanted to do everything you're told not to do on YouTube, which is not stick to one sort of lane, you know? And like I'll go out and I'll make a video about comics that Fantasy Booktube will probably not watch, but maybe some people will watch and will appreciate, and that's okay with me. Or you'll make a review about some spy thriller that you read, and maybe 10 people will watch it, but maybe those 10 people will then go and pick up that book, and that's fine, you know, that's cool because it's for fun. Like, this is just fun. But me personally, with wanting to start the channel, I have a bit of a background in doing podcasts, and I did like media in college. So I have made it a habit of making a fool of myself and other people listening to making a fool of myself with a microphone. And I always tend to do it with talking about whatever it is I like. I have a lot of interests. So I had movie podcasts, I've had comics podcasts. I ran a radio show in college about 90s hip hop and stuff.
What? Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, like we sat down, we discovered BookTube probably during COVID.
Yeah, like late COVID, I'd say. Like early 2021 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or lockdown. Sorry, you can't say that word. And we would be watching discussions and then pausing every 5 minutes to answer whatever question was brought up in that discussion. And we're like, hey, we do this anyway, so put a camera there.
Yeah.
You know?
How did you two meet, if you don't mind me asking?
Work. Yeah, our old job. So I moved to Ireland almost 6 years ago. And the first job that I got here, he started about a month after me, and we kind of had a little group of people of like newbies, and that's how we met. Yeah, very mundane.
Person from her team came over to me and said, "Oh my God, she is also half Spanish." And then she went back over to you and was like, "Oh my God, this guy is half Spanish." And then we were like, "Hello."
So are you two from Spain originally, or?
Yeah, so he's half Irish, half Spanish, and I am half German, half Spanish. So we have a collective 4 passports.
Oh,
yeah,
that's so neat.
If you put us together, you make one entire Spanish person.
I have Spanish blood, actually. I have a family member who lives there right now. A lot of family members visiting there. So I really need to go someday. What was that?
What part of Spain is your family from?
I think I want to say it's in the part that's, I don't know, actually. I need to look that up. I honestly don't know.
That's so cool.
I'll have to look that up. I'll find out and I'll let you all know. But But yeah, I do know that a lot of my blood, my roots are from Spain. My great-grandfather, he migrated from Spain to Mexico, and then now my family is mostly in Mexico, but I met a old cousin who actually has my exact name, my first name and my last name. I found this person who had my exact name, who lives in France, and and that's how I found out actually a lot of my relatives were around Spain and France, so
cool.
There's an interesting connection there.
That's really cool.
I need to learn more about.
It makes sense. You've got very Spanish hair and very Spanish eyes.
That's true.
Which is what everybody tells me. Like I don't look very Irish.
That's true. Yeah, you do look Spanish too. Yeah.
But then I open my mouth and everybody's like, "Oh my God."
It's funny though, because my whole life people have asked me like, "What's your ethnicity?" I've gotten that question a lot, and most of the time I'll say, "All I have is Mexican and Spanish blood." Like that's all I know of, and every time it's always surprised people in the past. I feel like I look kind of Spanish, honestly.
Yeah,
I think I do. But other people have said, "You look Greek," or "You look this," or I don't know. I've gotten some different Persian. I got that once. I've had different interpretations, but
a lot of the Mediterraneans, I feel, is a very similar look. So that's sort of interchangeable, especially when it's like mixed in with something else. I get told all the time in Spain that I don't look Spanish, and then outside of Spain I get told that I look Spanish. So like
So
You're
cool,
tall though,
man.
so like that's the German side.
That is the German side, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
super petite, so whatever that means, you know.
Same. I am petite too.
Nice. That's neat though. And so you 2 obviously had a love of story when you met too. Did you 2 find you naturally wanted to talk a lot about books when you met?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. hmm you were in a huge reading slump when we met. But one of
Massive.
the first things our I can't believe I'm going to tell this on the internet.
Like, go on,
Our
do it.
our fourth date was he took me to a bookshop. So I hadn't lived here for very long. I think I'd been here for a few months, and he took me to a bookshop and bought me a book because we'd been talking about.
I bought her The Green Mile.
Yeah, The Green Mile. I'd never read Stephen King, and he said it was one of his favorite movies and adaptations, and he loved the book as well. And he got me the book, and then we went to get dinner or whatever. And that is the bookshop that I now work in.
No
Yeah.
kidding. So you work in a bookshop too. I didn't really I don't know, maybe you mentioned that.
Only since July. So I quit my corporate job to go sell books,
Oh, that's
which
amazing.
it
Yeah.
has been so fun. Yeah.
We got a comment here from Andy Smith earlier, and he's watching while working at an indie bookstore.
Go on,
Nice.
Andy.
And
Andy.
he owns one, or I don't know if he still does, but I'm pretty sure he owns one. So
Cool.
That is really cool.
Nice.
we also got a question here, Yolanda, what are you drinking? I guess you both are drinking, but
I am drinking coffee.
Coffee.
Water.
Nice.
Also have water in a Guinness glass for some reason.
Well, you're in Ireland, so
We
that
only
fits.
have Guinness glasses.
Yeah. It's a rule. It's a rule in Ireland. All your glasses need to be made by Guinness. Anyway.
Yeah. I was just thinking earlier when you were talking about the channel and why we started. Another reason for me to want to start it that also made me really afraid to start it, but it's been great, was that I wanted to put myself out there and my opinions, and like kind of lose the fear of talking about things that I love. Because it's something that I've struggled with a lot, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to just being really into a hobby or a thing and then feeling protective over it or being made fun of for it, or like that kind of thing. And so I find it very difficult to be open about gushing about something or giving my opinions, especially if they're positive, without knowing how the person I'm talking to feels. And if I do, I will like automatically tone it down or try to adapt it, and without lying, but just like, being a bit more careful. And I wanted to stop doing that and be a bit more honest. And
Now we can be super intense.
doing that on the internet is really scary. But it's been really great because everybody has been so nice, and
Yeah.
it's kind of helped to be more honest in real life as well, because if people on the internet are nice, then what else is there to fear? But that's been one of the most, I don't know.
I think we decided on BookTube because of the community. It
Yeah.
seemed a lot more open to constructive conversation and conversation that doesn't quickly descend into absolute nonsense, like much of the internet can do. I'm not really one that thinks that the social media is the worst thing in the world. I think there are certainly problems with it. But BookTube was just it. I don't know. It just seems very cozy, very welcoming. I would have easily started a movie channel or like a comics channel, but I know that those circles, because I've been in them, can get very very negative and nasty. Like, let's just, yeah, I'll be honest. They can get nasty because they're so large. And BookTube is still quite a small, close-knit community that it's, I don't know. also, it's loads of people that just want to actually talk about the reading and about, oh, this thing spoke to me in this way. And by and large, most people do that in a way that is very thoughtful, more thoughtful than I've noticed in other circles online. I'm talking about online. Like, I can go down to my local comic shop and talk about comics to my mate who works in there for 3 hours, and it's wonderful. But I guess the internet is a scarier place.
Yeah, the comics like Facebook community and stuff like that is
it's intense. Yeah,
is intense. It's not somewhere that I would feel welcome, because I would feel like I'm not well read enough for my opinions to be respected there, you know. And I don't get that feeling from BookTube. I feel like anybody can just talk about what they're reading, and people will engage.
I think that kind of thing can exist in like book spheres as well, of course. Like, obviously, you know, there is snobbery everywhere, or there is gatekeeping everywhere, and it's still a conversation that I see happening in BookTube spheres or on the various discords that people have, but I just notice it less. And I kind of feel like, yeah, the conversations are always more constructive.
I wonder if some of that, because I agree. I mean, there is still some of that even on BookTube, but not to the degree that you might find it. Maybe I have not spent a lot of time in Reddit threads or, but my theory behind that is that maybe because on BookTube you are hearing the tone of a person's voice, and then if you're able to see your videos. I know some people just exclusively listen to videos, but you're able to see the mannerisms of the person talking. Maybe it helps you to have that extra layer of softening of tone versus just reading opinions. I feel like things can get lost in translation when we're just reading something.
Yeah,
for sure.
Do you think that might have something to do with it? Yeah. Yeah, that's my theory behind that. But it is pretty welcoming, I think, at least in this corner of BookTube. I know BookTube is pretty massive, but I think in this fantasy corner, it's pretty nice. Was there any particular reason, though, that you chose the fantasy corner? Because you do read so widely. Was there anything in particular that drew you into this part? Because there are a lot of other corners of BookTube as well.
Yeah, I think I only discovered BookTube through fantasy BookTube. So I think it was inevitable, and because I discovered it through fantasy BookTube, I guess I was reading fantasy at the time more than other things. So we
discovered BookTube because we both got really into comics. You were rediscovering, I was discovering during lockdown, and you read Hickman's Avengers and Secret Wars and got an itch for more sci-fi, like space opera, but also from there going into fantasy and just for this other worlds and losing yourself in that. And looking for recommendations, we just stumbled onto YouTube, and that's how, not BookTube. And then we just started chatting to people from this corner of BookTube, and it just kind of happened that way.
And also, I think that most people seem to be pretty open to all of the various things that we read. And I think people are starting to branch out as well, even among fantasy BookTube. Like, there's a lot of books that I would never have expected to make waves on fantasy BookTube, you know. I'm trying to think of an example, but like when Stoner, when all of you guys started reading Stoner, such a random book for fantasy BookTube to want to read, and I love that. That's great, because to me it's just a hobby of reading. I wouldn't say, oh, I'm a fantasy reader. I read, and that doesn't mean that I don't like fantasy. Of course I do, but yeah, I guess it was just a nice time to start doing a channel and getting involved in that, and then maybe fantasy BookTube will just evolve, and then all corners of BookTube will merge, and then it will become one large army, and we can, you know, take over Mordor.
There you go. Yes. So cool. A few things to respond to that, but first I'll just catch up a little bit here with the chats because Derry says here that I found that being truly enthusiastic about something you enjoy uplifts others, being loud about your passions. And I think
Mm,
that can speak somewhat to fantasy book too, because I think when it comes to fantasy in particular, one thing that is unique about it is that most of the time with fantasy, you have series. Not that series don't exist in other genres, but you're more likely to have series in fantasy. And because people are part of a world for multiple books and following characters for multiple books, I think that that's what generates fandoms and fan arts and
Yeah,
yeah,
enthusiasm. So I think it
yeah,
kind of levels up those emotions more
yeah,
yeah,
so than, I mean, if I could sit here all day and be like, stoner, but it's not going to be the same. I'm not going to start a
yeah,
huge stoner fandom based
yeah.
on that one standalone. Maybe that's an
yeah,
exception. But yeah, for the
I
most
think
part, I
it.
feel like that's one of the unique aspects of fantasy in particular.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's the reading fandom that you know um, that I think I enjoy most. But yeah, I didn't think of it that way. Like the fact that the prevalence of series will lead to you naturally spending more time with a certain thing, and that happens in comics. It happens in manga. That makes
That's
sense.
true.
I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah,
think of it that way.
Yeah,
yeah,
Um,
I think so. I think if it were just one book, I don't think things would take off as much. I think
yeah,
there's something to that that people just love fandom, especially
that's
here
so
on
true.
in fantasy. Polly says that she feels the same as Yolanda with the book community. It doesn't matter how much you've read. In my experience, I've never felt unwelcome or stupid. There are great people out there. I love this so much because that was one of my biggest insecurities about starting a channel is that I tend to read far less books than most people, and I read much, much more slowly, I think, than the average reader. And I'm also not, I'm starting to collect books now, but I'm not the biggest book collector as much as some people. And I feel like all those things don't sound aligned with the typical booktuber, but
yeah,
people have been so welcoming. I mean, I've been surprised. At least I personally haven't encountered anybody who's told me that's a problem for my channel, and I hope it's
yeah,
not. But it is very encouraging just, the spirit here, the
yeah. I
kindness
think,
and welcoming nature
and
of
I
people.
think it's important that like yeah, people don't judge or you like, and it doesn't even have to be an outward thing. It can be just something you feel like a gut feeling of the environment that you're in. It's not it just doesn't feel like a place that you would be unwelcome. And I kind of feel like, well, naturally, because we're all readers, so you want to sort of extend that empathy to another person because you're doing it every day when you sit down and read a book, you know?
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, and I've found like, I think the thing that we want to talk broadly about, like whatever we read, not just fantasy, is just that I don't see a lot of other genres on BookTube. Um, I like there's a sort of a lit BookTube, a lit
There
tube,
is. Yeah, there definitely is.
uh, which is pretty big, and there's a YA BookTube and stuff. But like, I don't see crime. I
there's
don't
not a lot
really
of crime.
see
Hmm.
historical fiction. Seems to be taken off a little bit, but there's still very very little. And the honestly, like, and it pains me, but the comics circles on YouTube are very rarely about the actual reading of the stories and more so about the collecting. And that,
That's a good point.
that I, because I don't feel like I'm a collector. I have
Mhm.
books that I like that I want to read, or books that, you know, I just want to own and then reread or whatever. I don't need to have all of this latest thing and, you know, oh, I'm going to collect this entire series because I need all of this series, even though I'm not interested in reading it or whatever. Yeah, don't think I've
Yeah. I think
ever.
the channel I would shout out, even though I haven't followed a lot of his comic content, because it's just not necessarily an interest I've come across lately. I mean, that
Mhm,
I have in myself at this point. But
mhm.
Michael K. Vaughan is a great channel that talks a lot about comics.
Cool.
And Criminali, I would say, is a channel that likes to talk about crime, pulp, and horror. That's a
Yeah,
big thing on his channel.
I like
Um,
Criminali. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a
he's a
good
great
channel.
channel. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, those niches are there, but you're right, they're not quite as big of circles, I would say, as maybe fantasy or something, but it is nice to see that you 2 read so widely. I will say it's interesting too, because I like, even thinking on my last wrap up, I think I talked about 1 fantasy book, and I'm somebody who has I mean, I don't have we were joking about this last night on Jimmy's channel because he has fantasy in his channel title, and I picked up so many non-fantasy recommendations thanks to him. But yeah, I feel like I have tried to go a little bit more towards the fantasy route, specifically
Mm,
because I would like to add female representation to
Hmm.
adult fantasy. I know that
Hmm.
there's a lot out there for young adult, and I think that's wonderful, but I think it's just nice to see more representation of adult fantasy readers, female adult fantasy readers. So I've
yeah,
wanted to add to that, but at the same time, like I pick up so much non-fantasy, but I
yeah,
find it to me, it only adds to my love of fantasy. I never feel like it diminishes it. I never feel like,
Yeah.
for
"Oh,
sure.
I read a non-fantasy book, maybe I don't love fantasy." It's never that. It's always, I love that I got to read something different, and I'm excited to go back into a fantasy world now. It just
For
adds
sure,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure,
yeah.
and I find it interesting with, like, coming in from I always feel like I'm on the periphery of this, circle, and then anytime I pick up a fantasy book, I'm coming at it from a perspective of just I feel like a regular reader, and then I'll react to a certain book in a certain way. I have found that I like a lot of books that fantasy readers seem to not like for some reason, and then I still have yet to read a lot of the ones that everybody just loves, and I don't know if I'm doing it because I feel like I'm a hipster, or if it's kind of daunting or scary, or I should have the right opinions about this or whatever.
Because you want to
But
read something because you want to read it at the moment that you want to read it, not because
yeah,
you feel like you should have read it.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's so important to me too. I
yeah,
totally agree with that, but I think that it really serves us as fantasy readers to read widely and to be open to different forms of storytelling so that we can appreciate it more in our own genre. I think
Hmm.
nothing could be a bigger trap than, not to say that there's any problem with fantasy following a certain formula. I mean, that's totally fine, but at the same
mm,
time, I think it's wonderful that we have so many different types of fantasy out there that can be enjoyed, There are various subgenres, there are various narrative approaches, there are various, you know, authors doing different things. And I think I don't know, I think that there's something to be able to, even if you don't love it all, it's nice
yeah,
to be able to appreciate it, and I think and be
100%.
open-minded,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And seeing the influences as well. I like seeing not
Mm.
only the fantasy
Hmm.
influences on certain authors, but even subtly recognizing what those authors read outside of fantasy is fun to
Yeah.
me. Like part of the reason, or part of the, I guess, the thing of our channel is me doing this sort of fantasy deep dive, which will take me years. But I want to read all the things that I feel are like the influential things. And for now, I'm only really going back to Tolkien because I've read Tolkien. So what? How did everything after Tolkien evolve, basically? Um, and I've read some really interesting books. Not all of them I've liked, some of them I loved, but even the ones I'm more mixed on, I can still see, oh, this writer probably likes military science fiction, or this writer probably liked noir, like 40s hard-boiled crime noir or that kind of thing. And I can
Perfect
see
example, yeah.
flavors of it in certain writers, and that's just fun. That's just, yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
That is
like,
fun. I love that. I mean, and you 2 are so, it seems like, are so well traveled, having lived in Spain and now living in Ireland, and I mean, it's kind of like traveling, isn't it?
Yeah.
yeah,
Being open to new things, and I'm just gonna catch up a little bit here in the chat before we move on, but Colin's Corner says here, "When I was reading and not interacting with people around me about it, it felt like a very solitary hobby. But reading has transformed for me into an amazingly connecting, enriching experience, which is so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Colin. I
yeah,
think that many of us can connect with that. You know, we have the popular found family trope in fantasy, and I feel like a lot of us can share similar feelings of connection in just talking to other readers who love reading like we do, and maybe we don't see that as much. You two said that you do have a lot of friends or did interact with a lot of people who are readers, but maybe just of different genres in fantasy or
Yeah.
yeah. So I think
Yeah.
that that could be really special. I also grew up with a lot of friends who read fantasy, but the weird thing about it is I always felt like I wanted to talk about books more than they did, and they never talked about it. They would just read but not talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I just always thought I always felt weird talking about it. So I'm like, this is a platform where you could talk about it? Like that's amazing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that this is a platform where you can talk about it and you can be as enthusiastic as you want. And not only will you not be judged for it, but other people will respond with the same enthusiasm, whether they have the same opinions as you or not. And I love that. That's beautiful. I think in real life, a lot of people hold back, or people are just more casual, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, but the main, I think, uh, the main channel that we found initially that made me want to start a channel, or made me think that I was allowed to start a channel, was probably Alan, because he is so enthusiastic and so infectious and so unapologetic with that enthusiasm, that I could really relate, but I'd always held it back. And like, hey, if other people are doing this and are announcing this into the internet and people are fine with it, then maybe I can do that too. So I think it's a great community. It's just
So
really
Alan was a huge inspiration for you?
massive. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
He was for me too. He's
Oh,
actually the biggest inspiration for me starting my channel.
that's so nice.
Yeah, which is why
No
he's here
way.
now.
Ooh.
Speak of the devil.
Very dark there, Alan.
I teach my students speak of the devil in Latin is lupus in sermone. So
Lupus in sermone.
anytime they're talking about someone
Sermone.
and they come in my room, they always go lupus in sermone, which just means wolf in the conversation. So
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
Lupus.
Yolanda was just saying, I think you heard her, but she was just saying that you were a huge inspiration for her wanting to talk on BookTube.
Oh, no, I didn't hear that. You sent me a message saying, hey, people are talking about you, but I was already backstage trying to fix my dang camera. So I was already about to pop in here. As
How
you can
funny.
see, apparently I live in the dark. While everyone else on the planet where the sun's shining. So
The same thing. The exact same thing was happening to us right before the stream. I didn't know what was going on with the anyway.
Yeah.
that's not how you spell my name, and y'all know that.
I mean,
Oh my gosh.
Well,
I
everybody's
like
very
how
happy to see
he
you.
also put it in all caps. He misspelled it in all caps. He probably mispronounced it too.
What? Oh my gosh. I don't know who Alan is.
Walker.
This is always the case. Sorry, John.
It's okay.
He's the thing. Music Man. Sorry.
Go ahead, Yolanda. Tell us about that again, since Alan didn't hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, since I invoked Alan.
You did.
I can hear it from anywhere. Anywhere in the world, I can hear it.
I was just saying that one of the main inspirations or motivations for us to start our channel, or for me to want to have a channel, was your channel, because it was one of the early ones that we discovered on BookTube, and you're so unapologetically enthusiastic about what you love in your videos.
Word.
And it's something that I've always held back in my real life, like my passion for all of these things, just out of caution and not wanting to be attacked for it or whatever. And just seeing so many people on BookTube, but specifically you just being so open with it, and seeing people's reaction and like how open-minded people are, yeah, made me want to do it and made me think that I could do it.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
It is called aggression, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I preempt it. Like people come at me for my opinions too, but I preempt it by saying, "Hey, now if you're gonna go down in the comments and be like, oh, that's not funny, Alan Walker, like, oh, I hate that thing," I say, shut up. Like, just shut up. Don't even mind.
That's my role. That's my role.
Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
So it helps to preempt it and just be like, guys, I don't care. Like, you don't like it, that's fine. I don't care. Like, I still like. I'm too old to care about that crap now. So I'm already getting that stuff on my One Piece video, like, you don't like Usopp? How dare you? Because let me tell you, there's nothing like less alpha male than arguing over anime characters. Like, how dare you? That is not kawaii. And it's just like, what are y'all doing? Like, do y'all know what you're arguing about? Get out of my face. Alpha male. I was kidding about alpha male stuff. That's stupid crap.
Yeah. I used to think that too. I used to feel like when I was younger, I remember a friend lent me Elric, which I did read when I was younger, but I actually DNF'd it before I read it. And he was like, what's wrong? Why didn't you like it? You know, like I had a problem. And I was like, I don't know. And I went back and I read it and I enjoyed it. But then the same thing happened with David Eddings. A friend lent me that. And I just couldn't get into it. I tried like 3 times with that series. I finally passed. I got into book 3 and then DNF'd again. I don't know. I kept DNFing it. And then a friend was like, why? Why don't you like this? And I'm like, I don't know. So it's almost the opposite, Yolanda. It was almost scary if I didn't love a book like other people. And I couldn't at the time even figure out why, because I wasn't well read enough to figure out what my taste was. I just knew I wasn't really vibing with David Eddings. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Do both of you have a book, at least from childhood, where it feels like, oh, this is where it clicked? Like, I love this. I love reading. Do you have one specific kind of...
One specific one? I don't know if I have one specific one because I went through a couple of different phases in my childhood. So I did love reading as a kid. And I remember one book I checked out several times it was probably an abridged version of Helen Keller's The Story of My Life. Because I just found Helen Keller such a fascinating person, such an inspiring person. And then I remember when I was around 9 or 10, I found out about this mystery, I don't know, like paranormal, paranormal, did I say that right? Yeah, paranormal, YA mystery, suspense, thriller author, Lois Duncan. And I started reading her books and I was obsessed. And so I got really into her books. And then went through R.L. Stine and got through that in middle school. And then stopped reading for a while before a friend lent me The Hobbit. And then The Hobbit just completely blew me away. So I started getting a little into fantasy around that time. So yeah, there were just some various points along the way, but my reading path has been kind of complicated. A lot of different weird reading slumps. What about you, Alan? Did you have a specific book that got you hooked in?
Did StreamYard take away the thing where if you join a stream, like you can log in and like type as yourself in the comments? Because that was there. Like I know that was there because I made a big deal about it being there.
Oh, I don't know.
Like that's
I don't see it either, actually. Yeah.
Like you
yeah, because I did not have a haircut on Thursday.
But like, the last stream I was on, or I don't know, like last week or sometime, I typed it there, and did they take it away? Y'all, what's going on? Does anybody know? Anyway, I read a lot. Like I was first in my class to know how to read, last to tie the shoes. Couldn't tie my shoes. Yeah, I still like I can tie my shoes, but I can't keep them tied. So I don't have shoes that have laces because I'm not dealing with it. But what do you mean?
I don't know. I don't really understand it. I don't get StreamYards at all. But we all share. I know Alan and I and Evie are part of a joint account, and so I guess something about that.
I still understand it. Anyway, that's probably why, because we're all on the same account. Where if I join, for example, Jimmy's, we're not on the same account, so I can type as I see.
Oh, I haven't even figured out how to do that, but
like I read
complicated.
a lot of dinosaur books and shark books when I was young, but I don't really remember a ton of books that I read. But like the first fantasy book that I remember reading was The Legacy, which is like book 4 of the R.A. Salvatore Dritz books. And it's the first Dritz book I read, and because I just discovered D&D, and the guy who taught me, the kid who taught me D&D, like recommended it, and I read it, and I'm like, I don't know, like this is cool, but I don't know what's going on. So then I went back and read the ones that came before it, and I was hooked. But that's like the earliest fantasy book I can remember reading. And then I read The Hobbit in middle school, which I really liked The Hobbit. Like I still really like The Hobbit. I love The Hobbit. I just don't particularly love Lord of the Rings. So
yeah, I was old for reading The Hobbit. I was like 15, I think, which I think is kind of old for reading The Hobbit, but I still loved it.
Yeah, I was in middle school. But yeah, that's what it is for me. And you know what? Like no one should be afraid on the internet of saying your like actual opinions, because Lord knows the internet needs some varying opinions. Like seriously, like Joanna and I have talked about this all the time, like about like what like hype plays some role, and the public perception of something plays some role in people's enjoyment of something. And I'm not saying everybody who enjoys something is lying. That's not what I'm saying at all. But like we just like to be involved in the popular thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Like
I think
wait, it's December. Wait for all of the top 10 lists that are coming out and compare them and see how many different things are on those top 10 lists that come out. It's going to be 7 out of 10 are basically going to be the same thing for a lot of people, and that's fine. But look at
that's why I'm kind of scared of making. I want to make, and I still haven't done this. I want to make a top 10 fantasy series video, but I'm kind of scared to do it because I feel like a lot of my choices are going to be some of the standard choices, and
but that's fine too.
Yeah.
That's fine too. And if you want to go really, really crazy with it, do that too. Like I think one of the earliest videos we did, I put on our top 10 sci-fi fantasy reads, I put like a 100 issue comics run. I put a singular individual book, and then I put in one place all of Lord of the Rings or all of Faithful and the Fallen or something. And it was the wildest mix of crap, and nobody cared. And that was nice. Actually, one person told me I was a bit of an idiot, but I didn't reply.
Somebody did tell you that, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, plot twist. You're the one insulting people in the YouTube comments. You're the idiot. Oh!
Yes.
Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I honestly don't understand what possesses people. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a jerk to this person that I've never met in real life. And you know what? They're going to change their ways because I called them a moron. That's never happened in the history of humankind. No one has ever made a mean remark on the internet and had someone be like, you know what? I am an idiot. You're right. Like I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do that thing that this person who called me an idiot wants me to do. Because
but I would respond to them in that way, going, thank you so much for the clarity that you have brought to my life.
That's what you
I will now
do.
change my ways.
You should do that.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, oh, well, good. And then they'll go about their day like, looking for some other manufacturing crisis to deal with.
I think with things like that, people really want you to reply with or reciprocate the venom, because if you don't reciprocate the venom, then they're just like, oh, okay, cool, and then it dissipates. They want the fight.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm willing to oblige them, to be honest.
Jimmy, there's nothing wrong with similar lists. I was using it to make a point that there's nothing wrong with doing something different, Jimmy. Jimmy out here trying to like there's nothing wrong with doing something different because so many are similar. There's nothing wrong with similar lists. I'm just saying that because many things are similar there's absolutely nothing wrong with someone coming in and being like, oh, by the way, I didn't read any of those things. In fact, I read this obscure e-zine from the 1830s that was only had one printing in a basement on a Gutenberg press. And
whose channel is that? I want to subscribe.
exactly. Be like, oh man, I've never read that one e-zine on the Gutenberg press from the 1830s in London. And he's like, yeah. So,
but I want to say really quickly here about this comment here. I know my first sci-fi book, it was Revolt on Alpha C by Robert Silverberg. Coincidentally, it was Silverberg's first published book. I got it at one of those elementary
yes, book fairs.
Yay, book fairs. Do they still do those? Do they still have book fairs?
They're banned in Florida.
Oh, because of the banning?
Banned? What?
Yeah, you can't have them in Florida because there's no way to curate the books that appear at them.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Also, I think they've not been a thing for a while because of something else. Like they definitely don't have them now, but I think most places didn't have them because of like socioeconomic issues, because it makes like people who can't afford to buy books like feel bad or something.
Right.
I don't know. They haven't been popular for a while, but they definitely can't do them now with the bannings.
That's so sad.
There is an annual book fair. It's every single year in my hometown in Spain, down by the port. And it's lovely because the port is a very nice place. And in summer, it's very nice weather. And then you get all these people and you can find books in lovely condition from like the 70s. And like nerd culture is big in Spain. So you can find, you know, 70s, 80s mass market paperbacks in Spanish, but of like that classic fantasy art that they just don't do anymore, you know, that a lot of it was ugly, but then some of it was gold. I picked up an old Elric Sailors on the Seas of Fate this summer at the book fair, and it's in Spanish, but it's got the classic cover. I don't know where it is.
I have an old Elric on my shelf.
Colin, you're 100% right.
Colin, let's go ahead and read the comment first. I feel like a lot of lists are similar because so many booktubers are people that came back to reading, and many of us are wanting to catch up and read the pillars of the genre. Except Alan. Alan's like, bah.
Well, because the thing is, like, almost without exception, every time I read one of the bleeding pillars of the genre, it's mid. Like, it's just freaking mid. And I'm like, why are these the pillar of the genre? Like, what if one of the pillars of the genre was amazing? What if that happened? Just one time, I could read one of the pillars of the genre and be blown away, instead of it being the most milquetoast, white picket fence, paint drying, like grass growing, like 70-degree weather in the summer with a single flower blooming in the garden, while middle-aged people who have 2.5 kids walk down the sidewalk of suburban America mid. Like,
longest metaphor ever.
I think that was the longest metaphor and longest sentence I've ever heard on BookTube.
They're never amazing. They're never amazing. Like, why can't they just be amazing? Sorry.
You know, I think it's a great point. Like, that's like a lot of people are trying to catch up, and we were talking about this briefly earlier, and because there's some big names. Like, I haven't read Stormlight yet. I haven't read Abercrombie yet. I do want to read these books, but I want to read them when I want to read them, and not because I feel like I need to check them off a list. Because I feel like, and you mentioned diversity earlier, Joanna. And I feel like if I made a list and read all the pillars of the genre first, I'd be reading a bunch of
white American dudes,
British and American white men, which is fine, but it's not the only thing I want to read. So I'll get to all of those, but in whatever order ends up happening. Rather than feel like I really don't want to feel that pressure, and I do feel it sometimes, but I don't want to pick something up just because I feel like I should.
It's funny
though.
I
love your intentionality so much, Yolanda, because I mean that's part of the whole point of this discussion series, is to hopefully get people to think a little bit differently. And there's no, like I said, there's no one right answer. But if somebody is picking up books because they want to, read the pillars of the genre. Not saying there's anything wrong with it,
No, there
but
isn't.
it's good to
No,
just know if there's like they're doing it because there's a pressure kind of feeling. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Um,
one of the pillars of the genre that is amazing is Song of Ice and Fire, but the problem is I'd already read that. I'd
Yes.
already read that, so like that doesn't count for my catching up with the pillars of the genre because I'd already read that one. Because again, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, there wasn't a ton of fantasy. Like there just wasn't. When I was in high school, I had Forgotten Realms books, Dragonlance books, and like Hob, which those covers were not going to get me to buy it or read it. Rift War, and then like freaking we had Dark Tower, the first 4 books, and Song of Ice and Fire. That's all. Like, because I went to the bookstore all the time and looking for new series. Oh, Black Company also.
Nice.
yeah.
And Song of Ice and Fire is one of the pillars of the genre that ruins all the other ones because it's better.
It's too good.
It's too good.
Except for Dance with Dragons.
What?
I'm not there
Need to
yet.
read.
I'm not there yet. I'm on A Storm of Swords, actually.
Which is one of the best books ever written.
It really is.
I read a Game of Thrones years ago, and then I said, oh, I love this. This is great. I'm sure I will finish this. But then I always bounce around from author to author when I read. And then it was just, the usual thing of like, it's not finished yet. And then I think I got burned by the last season of the show. So the motivation to like be in the world was mixed. But then honestly, it was actually House of the Dragon that then made me pick up Fire and Blood. And I feel like picking up Fire and Blood without actually finishing A Song of Ice and Fire was a crazy move, but I felt crazy.
You did it all backwards.
So I did it. And now I decided, okay, so I'm going to reread Game of Thrones. And then I could not stop. And then I immediately picked up Clash of Kings and I could not stop. And now I'm on A Storm of Swords. So we'll get to Dance with Dragons.
So I'm a terrible fan because I still haven't read Fire and Blood, and I still haven't read the Duncan Egg novellas. I still need to do that, but I am going to. I'm sorry, what?
I'm hoping to read Fire and Blood this year. I haven't read it either.
Well, tell me when, because I might jump in with you if you're okay with that. But what I was thinking though is that probably wouldn't be a bad idea, only because I have some vague idea of what's in Fire and Blood, like the doom I hear about is discussed in depth. Some various historical things in A Song of Ice and Fire are discussed in depth. And I mean, those things are alluded to. They're discussed like somewhat in passing, like in A Dance with Dragons. So I think that actually wouldn't be a bad choice. I think that actually might make you appreciate A Dance with Dragons all the more. I love that book. I personally think that I just get sad that people are hard on it. It's different. I can kind of understand it. It is a slower paced book, I would say, but I still loved it. And I would say it's slower paced because we do get a lot more world building. And I don't think people expect that in book 5 in a series to have way more world building development happening. And then an introduction of more characters and each chapter taking its time to build things again. So I can kind of get it, but I still love it. I still think it's excellent.
Let me explain to you the problem with Dance with Dragons. I don't care what everybody's eating. I don't care if people using the bathroom. I don't know why this trip has to take so long. Also, what if one of the characters moved locations once in 3 books? What if that like what if we stopped like what if we just moved the storyline along the 5th book? Like what if we went with that? And there's no dancing.
Is that true?
I mean,
no.
I read it. I've read Dance with Dragons once. I've read Feast for Crows once. I've read the other 3 thrice. So
yeah.
From like since joining the BookTube circle and like chatting on Discords and like chatting to Jimmy as well, like I'm very, very curious about Feast for Crows. But everybody says, oh, that's the book that everybody loves on a reread. I'm like, well, okay, well, let me read it first.
I loved all 5 books on my first read. I'm just going to say it. And in fact, at the time, I remember talking to my cousin who was much younger than me and 7 years younger than me. And she had read all the books as well around the same time. She read them before I did. And I remember her telling me, I think I was reading book 2 at the time. She said, "Oh, book 3 is the best." And she said that. She said that books 4 and 5 weren't as good, that book 3 is the best
3
back
is
then. And at the time, I remember thinking the concept of ranking the books was just strange to me. Like, I never did that back then. And I read all 5 books and I couldn't rank them. I just couldn't rank them. Like,
3 is clearly the best, Joanna. That's how you rank them.
but you
It's
get to the end of book 5 and you just want more. Like, I felt that way. I was like,
who is the you in this sentence? Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to the whole Song of Ice and Fire fandom who's been mad at George R. R. Martin for not coming out with Winds of Winter forever.
I'm not mad at him. I think the
Okay,
poor man needs
you
to quit
accept
stealing
Alan.
and bust out that book, but you don't see me throwing bricks at his window. Like, I mean, he's taking too long. I mean, that's true. But I mean, three's clearly the best book. Chat, hook me up. Hook me up here. Help me up in the chat. Tell me that book 3 is the best. Tell Joanna the book 3 is the best.
But shout out to, I'm going to give a shameless plug here though. After you finish A Feast for Crows, Carlos, please watch my Cersei video because I put a lot of effort into that video. And we were talking on Chatting with Nuts last night how that video just, it needs a little more love from the viewership. I was very proud of it.
What is the title of the video?
Oh, Jimmy got after me about this last night. It's something like Cersei Lannister.
It's Feast for Crows review or something like that. Just type in Joanna Feast for Crows, you'll find it.
Yeah, it's A Feast for Crows. It does have spoilers though. Cersei Lannister, A Feast for Crows.
Thank you, Zin. Zin knows.
Yeah. It looks I don't know if you could see it.
Oh, Chris.
It looks like that.
I love book 2. I'm one of the few that likes book 2. The Battle of Blackwater Bay, like Syracuse, all the way. Like, there used to be more Game of Thrones fans in my classroom. So when I talked about the Battle of Syracuse from ancient Athens, I'd be like, "This is like the Battle of Blackwater Bay," and people would be like, "Oh my gosh!" Now I'm like Game of Thrones, and like no one's seen it, or read it. But I don't know. I like it. I like Clash of Kings also.
I really liked Clash of Kings, but I think I preferred the first book. I just think there's something about the structure of the first book and the way he builds out Ned that is just utterly compelling.
One of my favorite.
I find it so fascinating that everybody else they advance their own stories in their chapters while like constantly advancing the plot, the overarching plot for everybody, and everybody's chapters build off the previous POV while still taking into account everything that they've had. It's just, I found that less so in Clash of Kings because it's basically like, for example, Jon is just walking around being cold for all of Clash of Kings.
Jon's the worst character in the entire. Nope, Bran is the worst character. Other than Bran, Jon is that long metaphor description of the pillars of the community, or pillars of the book 2 community that I was just talking about. Jon is. Hold on, where it's a Jon chapter?
No, I don't think so.
Jon is the most milquetoast, like generic, like, "Oh, I must do the right thing. I am having a crisis of conscience.
No.
Oh, hello, wild woman. I know nothing. Please teach me." Like, it's just like, Jon, I don't care. Like, I don't care, Jon. Why is Samwell Tarly more interesting than you or anyone else at that wall? Like,
you've just.
I think it's because
what you've done to Jimmy.
Because the information we need about Jon has actually not been revealed yet.
No, I don't.
But it has been 5 books.
Yeah, I love Jon. It's funny though, because I remember when I read him, I always say about, I've said this story before, but a lot of my friends at the time who were reading or into the Song of Ice and Fire that I knew really did not like Jon Snow, like hated him.
See?
And I never understood why. So he does have a love or hate thing going on for people. I don't get it, but
yeah, I never liked Jon, but I love Eddard. Sorry.
Yeah.
You love Jon Snow?
I do love Jon Snow. I have only read them once, each of them. Like a decade ago or more. So I am just rereading Game of Thrones now for the first time. And
because I won't shut up.
Because you won't shut up. And see, the thing is, it was the first adult fantasy that I read. So, starting strong. And it was because my mother picked them up because she was all paranoid that she had really bad memory and she wanted to like exercise her memory, and she was told that there were loads of characters in it. So that's why she got a Game of Thrones and loved it and told me to read it. I was 13. So, parenting.
Yeah.
And I read the first 3, I think, like pretty much in a row, and then Feast for Crows a little bit later, and then Dance of Dragons came out like a couple of years, like 2 years later or something. And then I decided, I was like, okay, I definitely need to reread these, because by the time I got to Dance, there were details I could tell I was missing. So I decided, okay, whenever he announces wins, I'll reread them all. And here we are. And I've stuck to that. And now I'm just like, you know what? I just want to reread them, but as an adult and with a lot more experience and having read a lot more. So I think my experience reading them is going to be very different. And I'm excited to see what that looks like in terms of what characters I like, what books I like, because I struggled with Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons the first time because of the change of pace. And what you said, Alan, like time just doesn't pass. And then we go into Dance of Dragons and it starts before Feast for Crows, and you're just like, get on with it. But this time I'm going to have the right expectations going into it. So I expect to like them a lot more, or just have a different experience. So anyway, I'm really excited for that because I love the world. And I do believe that Winds of Winter will someday come out.
I think so.
So yeah,
I think like going back to what we were talking about earlier as well of like reading broadly, the fact that we read a lot of stuff, that when you come back to fantasy, it just sort of enriches it then, because maybe you're seeing another technique that he's using over here that you've spotted in these other books that you've read in the last couple of years, and that's fun.
Well, and I wonder too, when it comes to reading fantasy, because I think that George R. Martin, I think he's brilliant in so many ways as a writer. He's brilliant with character and with plot and with world building, and he does it all together very well. But I also wonder too, when it comes to reading a series like that, the intention behind the book, and whether some of that is to make you immersed in the world, and whether that maybe becomes a little bit more of a focus than let's get to the beats of the story. Do you think, there could be a difference with those two things?
I mean, maybe, but like the problem is that stuff happens in the first 3 books, and then like Yolanda says, it just feels like the pace slows down in 4 and 5. And again, we keep veering into crap that I'm critical about. Really quickly, before we get critical, let me talk about the things that I like about this. I don't like Jon Snow. I think Jon Snow sucks, and I think Bran sucks. However, and I think Sansa sucks. I like a ton of characters. We're only talking about the ones that are bad. I love Ned.
Sansa is the best Stark.
Ned is the best Stark. But I love Arya. I always loved Littlefinger and Varys. I love Davos. Davos is by far my favorite character in book 4. I love whatever book he's in. I love Stannis, the True King. I love hold on. Roose Bolton. I love Roose Bolton. His son can go like yeet off a cliff, but I love Roose Bolton and his leeches. I like all the Greyjoys except Theon, who can also yeet. There's so many good characters. Like
Roose is scary. I think Roose is like one of the scariest characters I've ever come across.
And Oki, some Oki dude is wrong. Tyrion is one of my favorite characters.
Can you highlight the comment? Because I just don't. I'm sorry. I'm behind in the chat.
Tyrion is one of my favorite characters, and always
Tyrion is excellent.
So Tyrion
and Sansa are probably my favorite characters. And Ned.
I was so proud because I got my dad to read A Song of Ice and Fire, and he had never read fantasy in his life. He was mostly reading. He's an avid reader, but mostly read crime fiction, thrillers, and And I thought, well, there's a little bit of a murder mystery in A Song of Ice and Fire, so maybe he'll get into it. I'll take a chance. And he loved it. He
Nice.
got so sucked in. He binged all 5 books. Tyrion was his favorite character, and he has a very thick Mexican accent. He's like, Juana, when is Martin coming out with the next book? I'm like, I'm sorry, Dad. It's not going to come out for a while. He's like, I need the next book. He kept on asking me that like for several months. But Tyrion was his favorite
Look,
character.
like there is something about a book that I have not read. I have not read Storm of Swords since before, Dance with Dragons came out in 2012. So it's been 11 years at least since I've read this. And I can still remember the last line of a chapter involving Tyrion and his dad and the bathroom. And it is such a good line.
No spoilers, but yeah.
I'm not going to. I'm just saying that there is such a good line that ends this chapter that I still remember. Plot points in frickin' these books. Like I love Tyrion and Varys the spider and Littlefinger. Littlefinger was always one of my favorites because
we have little Tyrion and Varys are my favorite duo. We have little Funkos. I don't know if you can see them right here of Tyrion and Varys right in front of the book.
That's
nice.
Oh, are those two on the third shelf?
Yeah.
Oh, bottom shelf. I gotcha.
So are you both rereading A Song of Ice and Fire right now? Or I know, Carlos, you are, and you're on your way to book 4?
He's reading it for the first time. Well, we read Game of Thrones the rest for the first time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm rereading. So I'm on Game of Thrones, and you're on Storm of Swords. I'm going slow. Well, I'm going slow with Game of Thrones because it's the one that I know beat for beat. So I don't have like the urge of continuing as much. I feel like that's going to change as I move forward. But I have it like as a slow read because we have the big like illustrated anniversary editions. So I can't like take it to work to read on my break or anything like that, so I only read at home. But yeah,
I'm loving it.
Yeah, I love that series so much. It's absolutely brilliant. But I thought I'd ask you too, and while we have Alan here too, especially, so you two have had a couple of segments on your channel where you've read books that other booktubers read. So you had a month of Alan. That was the first episode of that. And then you had a month of Jimmy. And so tell us about those experiments and what you learned.
That's been so fun. I think it's been like the most fun we've had on BookTube outside of discussions like this. And
sort of stressful, but really fun.
Yeah, sort of stressful because it's having like more of a TBR. The month of Alan was something we were going to do before we had a BookTube channel.
Yeah.
Just like from watching BookTube. I mean, like, Alan talks about books that nobody else talks about. And they all sound so interesting. And we realized that we had bought a lot of books specifically from your recommendations. And so we decided, hey, wouldn't it be fun just someday, like talking, if sometime next year we just pile them all like on the coffee table and do like a month of Alan, we just start picking at them.
Put Grey Coats, KJ Parker, Senlin, blah, blah, blah.
Daniel Abraham.
Yeah. Oh, KJ Parker.
Oh, by the way, we're stocking more KJ Parker in work. I saw that today.
Nice, buy one.
Anyway, so we were going to do that anyway, and then we started the channel. And I think initially we said we'd do it in like February or March. We ended up starting the channel in March. So we thought, hey, why do we not like announce that on the channel and make it like a thing? And then the idea for
not even looking, Alan. Sorry, go ahead. Go on, Yolanda. I'm sorry, interrupted.
I love the
company. My dog is over there by the door going. Shut up, Sophia.
Sorry, I'm so sorry, Yolanda. Go ahead.
It was for the dog that was important.
Yes.
But yeah, so then the idea for the tribute video came, and like
I think originally it was just going to be okay. So we're going to read a couple of these books. And then I think like walking home from work, I just had a terrible day in work. I was extremely bored with people. And I was like, you know what would be fun if we did the video in sort of Alan's style? And then I said, I said all the things that Alan says. And then it just became a thing. And we're like, oh, we should do this for like other people too.
But it's been like, it's obviously fun to just pay tribute to booktubers that we love and like channels that we love. But then in terms, and also just ticking books off the TBR, because those are books that we had already bought that we were going to read anyway, but just like putting them all together. But then that exercise, unintentionally, that's not what we were thinking, but of reading a few books in a row that one person loves and kind of seeing the through line, like by like, you know, of like, oh, I understand why this person loves this book, you know, like we got that with Alan books and with Jimmy books.
It's such a good point.
Alan, you need to read these books. I don't know if you can see this. CJ Sansom.
I don't think that's a hyped author or book.
It's not, but two problems. One, someone just told me to read a book, and two, that author's names are initialized. And
Yeah.
Oh no,
and here's,
not this.
and here's the
It's
thing.
a self-pub.
Yeah. Oh, so the thing is, I don't actually care about initialized authors, but the pushback that people have come at me because I made that one observation that there's too freaking many, I'm doubling, quadrupling down. And you know what? I'm not going to read any book that's by an initialized name. How about that, BookTube? Come after me. Like,
this is the first one. This is the first one. It is about a hunchback lawyer in Tudor England who solves both murders and also conspiracies to do with the crown and that kind of thing. I'm just saying, justice. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm looking it up now. Dissolution. Cool. I do like things called Dissolution.
It's really good. I've only read.
I've been told to read these before. This is already on my list. Like, I literally already have that as want to read. People already told me that. Yeah. I'm good. We're good.
I'm really intrigued though. A hunchback lawyer.
Yes.
I mean, I don't even think I have never read from a lawyer's perspective before.
It's probably my favorite historical fiction series, and from everything that we read in the month of Alan, I think it would suit Alan, to be honest. I know who recommended the book to you, because I watched your interview with Richard Swan.
Yes, thank you. It was Richard Swan. Yeah, because that's one of his inspirations for Justice of Kings.
Of course,
yes,
makes so much sense.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm curious about it. But what did you learn about Alan? It sounds like it could almost be a psychological analysis of a booktuber.
I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I just feel like if you had to be inside my brain for just one day, like if anyone could just be inside my brain for one day, people cut me some slack. It's not a fate I wish on anybody. Like,
well,
don't get inside. I'm depressed.
I read books about military logistics. I read books about people really, really obsessed with justice. And I read a book about a teacher that was all three of those things. And Senlin is probably one of my top 5 books of the year, I gotta say. That's awesome. One of the best books I've read in the last few years.
Good. I'm glad you
love Senlin. I have to say, I just need to get it out there because, Alan, I know you agree, and I need to tell you, I get really upset when people say that Senlin is a bad character or that he's boring or that he's like, whatever. Like, I loved him as a character. I think he's a great character, and I latched onto him so much, like personally, that when people attack Senlin, I'm like,
yeah.
I guess you learned wrong, Evie. Evie says here that she thought that you didn't like Senlin.
No, I like Senlin. I didn't like Long Price Quartet.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. No. Look, I'm always more shocked when someone says they did. So, like my baseline for people is like, hey, you want to read this book? You ain't gonna like it, but you might.
I set myself up for a failure there, I think, because I hyped it up so much in my mind. I was so certain that I was gonna love it, and then the books are so short, but then we have those like big like omnibus editions where it's like 2 and 2, and the font is quite small. And I know all of that is just psychological, but like the fact that there's so much on one page, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna love this. I'm gonna read. Oh, it's less than 300 pages. I'm gonna read it so fast, and I wasn't reading it fast, and it wasn't quite what I expected. So set myself up for failure, because I didn't think it was a bad book. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, Senlin,
I think
adored.
a dominant theme to try to answer Joanna's question, but a dominant theme that I think comes across from, like, we've watched Alan a lot. We listen to Chatting with Nuts / Ranting with Alan a lot. But one thing that comes, or one theme that I think at least came out to me, is main characters who, like, the world is telling them that they're wrong, or the world is telling them that, well, you might believe in this thing that is fair, or you might be pushing against this thing that is quite clearly unjust, but you can't do anything about it because that's just the way the world works. And all of the characters, or well, most of the characters that, at least in the theme, are trying to say, well, why? You know?
Sounds like a Ned Stark kind of.
Why do you think Ned, why do you think Ned's my favorite character in Game of Thrones? That is I feel like I should be paying you for this therapy session.
The funny thing is, like, I put up with this in work all the time, and I'm going to give you a really silly example, and I hope nobody from work is watching this, but I got
your channel is fine, they won't find it.
I got a message the other day. So I manage a team in Barcelona. Obviously, I speak Spanish. The office is in Dublin, so yeah, I look after the Spanish people. That's cool. But part of that is me saying good morning to them, right? And I say, "Hola Barcelona, buenos días," which is hello Barcelona, good morning. I get a message from another person saying, "Can we keep all communication to English, please, just so that we can keep communication airtight and that we know what we're communicating all the time?" And I gave them a big communication, everything in English, all the professional stuff in English, but because I said good morning,
how dare you,
in Spanish, I got reprimanded.
What adult doesn't know that buenos dias means good morning? Like, that's not possible. Like, you passively absorb that. It's just like knowing uno, dos, tres. You passively absorb that by growing from a tadpole to an adult. Whatever.
But that's not the worst part. I also sent a GIF of the Joker from The Dark Knight saying hi, you know, like the good morning, like it's a Monday morning, you're kind of half asleep, blah, blah, blah. And to like make people laugh in the morning, I'm like, hi. And he says, could you please keep GIFs out of the professional communication channels because of the... And I'm like, why?
This is like a group chat. It's not like email even, you know?
You have hit a soft spot for me. This whole culture of professionalism that people have to act a certain way, just like me as a 41-year-old, I am required to be, especially 41-year-old in the South, I am required to behave and comport myself in a certain way because that is just what things do. And heavens forfend, I find something amusing or enjoyable, and I express that in a gleeful manner. Well,
yes.
Oh, you should know better as an adult. Like, you're acting like a kid. I'm like, you're acting like an a-hole. So why don't you get out of my face? It's just so, like, also ableist. I have autism. So how do you feel now? Boom, boom. We drop that on you. Freaks.
There's this conception, like this perception in a lot of corporate culture, but it seeps into like everything, I think, that being enthusiastic is being childish.
Yeah.
I hate that. And it's ridiculous because I think it's more childish to be offended by something completely innocuous that isn't hurting anybody, that doesn't actually mean anything or impact communication or whatever you're doing at all. That is, to me, a lot more childish than expressing your emotions. Like,
absolutely preposterous. Like,
also, if the work is being done and people are having a bit of a laugh while it's being done, what is the problem with that? Like, what is the problem?
I am very fortunate in that my school, like, I didn't realize that a lot of other schools were not like mine. I don't have a uniform. I don't have to wear slacks and a button up or a polo. Like, I wear t-shirt and jeans to school every single day. I could not do this job if I couldn't. But I know there's a bunch of schools like around the country that you have to wear nice clothes to teach. And I have teachers at my school, and that's fine if they want to. Like, if you want to dress like that, that's fine. But like insisting that you dress like that, well, because then you're not promoting a professional standard. And like, are you telling me I can't do my job in t-shirt and jeans? Like, I am less effective at my job with t-shirt and jeans? You're wrong. Like, shut your mouth. Like, that's not right. I am less effective in slacks because I'm not comfortable. Like, I am not comfortable in dress clothes. I feel constricted and like,
It's
like
very,
I never
yeah.
dress up unless I have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable about the idea of professionalism. I'm not saying that everyone has this definition of professionalism, but I do feel like there is this pervasive idea that being professional is being confined to being a certain way, like what you're saying,
Yeah.
Alan. And there's almost like an imbalance between authenticity and being professional, you know? So
100%.
it's kind of a tricky thing. It's a tricky
Yeah.
subject.
There's also a major discrepancy between, say, management or people in positions of power saying toxically positive things or wanting you to be positive, but then when you're actually positive, you're positive in the wrong ways. So what do you actually want from me? You know?
There is no toxic positivity like the toxic positivity given to teachers. Like, now there are certain social like there are certain ways that like you there is a certain way that people should act in public, but like innocuous crap is
Sure.
like putting a GIF in an email. I'm sorry, like, did you mess anything up? Was it a GIF of like nudity or pornographic or like dropping an F-bomb? Like, was it any of that? Like, no, it's a freaking joker saying hi. Like, that's innocuous. Someone being excited about something is innocuous. Someone running around in their underwear, like in a public place, like, you know, with, you know, vomit, like drooling down their chest because they've just like chugged an entire barrel of 1930s whiskey, like in the middle of town square. I mean, okay, like we can insist that, hey, that's probably not the best way to comport ourselves in public.
Yeah.
But like, it's just,
Yeah.
well, it's just stupid. I'm with you.
Well,
Like there's
all
a
of that-
lot of agreement here.
All of
Anyway.
that sort of came out in all of the books that we read in the month of L.
Yeah. Well,
Interesting. That is an interesting
I also think it's
theme.
really interesting. I didn't notice that.
It really
No, I
has
think it's really interesting because I know for myself, sometimes I won't even see it till after I film a wrap up, and I always regret that I discover it later. But I'll look back and think there was like a through line. There was a bit of a theme happening here or a pattern in my reading. Maybe not with every single book, but I could sometimes find that. And so I think it's really cool when you're able to explore that or notice that. So
Yeah.
I think
yeah,
it's-
really interesting.
It's also like it's really cool for me. Just the thing that I like about reading pretty broadly, and I think we filmed a video that's not out yet that I said something like an ideal month for me would be if I could read one book per favorite genre and then just see what kind of mood that was, you know. But I like seeing what moods I'm in. Like this year I've wanted to read a lot more American literature, and then I just happened to read a lot of McCarthy and a lot of Steinbeck, and now I look back on it and I'm like, they have very similar themes and very different worldviews. So
Interesting. I would have never thought of a through line between those two authors, but
yeah, neither
that's
did I.
so
But
cool.
like,
Hi, Christina. Hello.
Yeah, I've just been in the background and I thought I would pop in and just say hi real quick.
Hello.
Yay.
Hi.
Everybody's happy to see you. So
Really,
thank you.
I don't know that I've met you guys, so it's nice to see you.
nice
Yeah,
to
it's nice to meet
officially.
you.
Yeah, I'm Alan's wife, so
They know.
I know, but I just feel like I should chip in. Officially make it more official introduction.
That's true. I'm not sure I've talked to you guys live before either. So
I
like,
don't think we
Okay,
have.
so-
No.
but yeah. Well, I guess it's nice to talk to you.
Faces too.
That's true.
Okay, sorry for interrupting. Please carry on.
Yeah. It
Oh.
is good to talk to you. I don't know why I hadn't considered that. Like, I haven't talked to you.
I think-
I have to say really quickly, I just have to insert this that for anybody who, since we did mention Senlin Ascends earlier, if anybody finishes this series, then I highly recommend checking out the discussion over on Philip Chase's channel with Alan and Philip Chase and
Mhm.
Christina. Christina has one of the most inspiring um, letters that she reads on the video. It was so beautiful. It was so moving. It just absolutely made my day. And I have not read the series. I spoiled myself. But I loved it. It was worth it to watch that video. So
Oh, did
just
she
wanted to
write a
share that.
letter to Josiah Bancroft?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, to
Oh,
the
cool,
cool.
author. Yeah, because she was so moved by some of the choices in book 4. So
cool.
I will read those early next year because my instinct is to binge series most of the time, and especially when I love it, right? And I just wanted to keep going, but because we were trying to read as much variety as possible, obviously, um, in the month of Alan, I parked it, and then there was other stuff, and then there was a month of Jimmy, and so I haven't continued yet. But I'm really excited to keep going, and I'm so curious about was it Fall of Babel because
yes.
it's so
Yeah.
divisive, and I just I mean it's possible to not like what's going to happen, but I just cannot imagine that the quality falls off a cliff um for me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
I'll
very
just tell
excited.
you, as someone who's never even read Senlin Ascends, I spoiled myself for the series, and I think that the ending sounds awesome. The
Okay.
Cool.
ending being spoiled for the ending kinda made me wanna read the series, so, yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Also, kind of about that as well, I think I do kind of have opinions, and I'm not even there yet, but I just feel in my bones that it's absolutely fine for you to not like the ending of a series because you don't like what happened, but I don't think that inherently makes it a bad book or that the
Yeah.
writer somehow got worse from book to book. It's the phrasing sometimes that bothers me with, and this, it's not just referring to this book, but I've noticed it with other books that I like or books that I've read that, even if I didn't like, I just sometimes the phrasing, especially in the online space when people putting themselves out there, and I think reading broadly helps you recognize these things, and it helps you become aware of, well, did I dislike the plot and where it went, or do I think this guy's a bad writer? Well, if you like the first 3 books in the series, you clearly think this person is a good writer. So maybe you just didn't like what happened, you know? Anyway, just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
But it doesn't mean that I think that's invalid. Like, it's totally valid to not like what happened, but say that instead. Anyway,
Instead of making then an objective statement, you mean? Or
yeah,
about the
yeah,
book or quality or author? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's like I don't. People can feel how they want to feel, like they can, because I sit here and don't like people saying like, well, I'm wrong or whatever. But I mean, I agree. That's always been my point, is that I don't think book 4 is a dip in quality. I just think it's a dip in like what is happening. Like I
Yeah,
get that, like that you're like, and there's some unsatisfying things in there for me too. But it is what it is. I don't think his writing is worse. Like that's the weird thing. Like his writing is, I don't know, whatever. Before people come in and be like, I did not enjoy it. I think that there were too many adjectives in this particular section, or whatever. Yolanda and Carlos, it was a delight talking to you. And Joanna, thanks for letting me crash again.
Oh, you're welcome.
We got to go get the dog's nails cut.
Oh,
Okay.
good luck.
So the problem is that Christina used to do it, but because one of the dogs goes and acts like he's dying when his nails are getting cut, that dog is fine. Like she won't do it. Like she won't go take him because she feels too bad. I'm like, then I'm gonna go and take him, and I'm not gonna feel bad at all. I'm gonna shout down the hallway like, Sam, you are fine.
Yeah.
So
Christina, the dog is fine.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm gonna go give this
I'm
dog
gonna-
some Walker justice.
I'm
I would be a chicken too, Christina. That's hard.
So I am just clicking leave studio and not end stream. So
Yes.
Very
Oh, yeah,
good.
yeah. Because he ended my stream one time. Okay, thanks, Alan. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye,
Alan.
Alan.
Thanks, Christina. We'll see you guys later. All right. So, yeah, there's a lot of excitement about Books of Babel here, and I know that I'm not alone, it seems, in being inspired by Christina's letter, by the way. It was so beautiful, so moving. I
Nice.
think people in the comment section of Philip's video were saying, Christina, get her a YouTube channel, get her a BookTube channel. Oh, you said you feel it in your bones. That's kind of a gift that Alan has. Anyhow.
Oh, Evie, how somewhere in the chat that I can't see, tell me, are you liking The Red Pony? I know it made you cry earlier. Have I finished The Red Pony? No, I have 25 pages left. I am reading The Red Pony, by the way, by John Steinbeck, with Evie today. It's a novella or a short story. I don't know, something like that. But if you thought that it was going to be about a young boy getting a pony and being all happy, then think again. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful story so far.
I think I've heard about that book. I want to say, I could be wrong, but I think Murphy Napier read that a while back.
Oh, cool. Cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
Actually, yeah, that reminds me. You have read some McCarthy and you like McCarthy.
Mhm.
I would be intrigued for you to read some Steinbeck and kind of see if you also see the similarities in theme, but the completely different perspective.
I did read East of Eden this year. East of Eden was my first Steinbeck. So I'm not sure if I see it yet, but I loved East of Eden. Absolutely loved it.
I'll get to East of Eden next year, definitely. And Grapes of Wrath. I've been doing all the short novels this year.
Yeah.
Are
you guys there?
Yeah.
Oh, did we freeze?
I'm so sorry. It looks like my connection got unstable.
You're back, I think.
Okay.
We can.
Am I back? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, y'all. I'm on Ethernet, so I don't know why. I've been having connection problems lately, so I apologize about that. Hopefully that was just a little blip. Yeah, East of Eden was absolutely incredible. And it was really, it's kind of sad. I got to the end of that book. I guess you'll see what I mean when you get to it. But I got to the end of that book and I just felt kind of sad that it was over. And I felt like I wanted more with the characters, but at the same time, I think it was very satisfying. I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but
he's very, very good at the bittersweet kind of, like, it is just, this is life, you know? Like, say how you felt with East of Eden. Oh, I was sad that it's over. I think maybe that's probably part of the point he was trying to make, like these time periods of your life that are this sort of bubble of memories right there. Like I just recently read Cannery Row as well, and it's a very, very simple story just about a group of people doing a nice thing for somebody in the community, and it is just about, oh, like, even if our community is a bit of a shithole, maybe it's actually a place that we really love because it's full of all these people. But yeah, he's very, very good at the sort of melancholy of it all, and like nostalgia for that kind of thing is inherently melancholic anyway, but he's very good at that.
Very much so. I very much got that vibe from that book. There is a character, a female character who plays like the female. Oh, she's absolutely despicable. She's horrible. You'll find out when you read it. I shouldn't say anything else, but it's beautifully written, and I totally get what you're saying. It's interesting because I talked about it with my mother, and my mother read it after I finished reading it. She didn't know I'd read it, and I asked her if she had read it, and turns out she read it when she was a teenager. And I was so impressed how much she remembered from the book. But she said that what was so hard for her is reading it as a 16-year-old and thinking life cannot be that sad. It can't be that tragic. She was really deeply sorrowful by the story. And she said it had to do with things that she feels like you come to recognize the tragedy of life more as you get older, but when you're young, it's hard to face that life can't be so sad. So that was something that really affected her.
Yeah. The thing I really like about Steinbeck, though, is that he leaves me with that sense but he says that that's really beautiful anyway. But I don't
Yeah,
get that.
that's true.
But I don't
Yeah.
get that with McCarthy. Like,
Mhm.
No.
I said it to you earlier that it's kind of like reading McCarthy is him telling me, like, America is doomed.
Mm.
And that's it. And Steinbeck is saying America is doomed, but we can do something about it. I think
Mm.
that is kind of what I get.
I think Steinbeck, and the ones that I've read anyway, I read Of Mice and Men and The Winter of Our Discontent. And I think he just, even when he's presenting you with like sadness and ugly things, he has that message of like the small kindness and the humanity. Whether the characters are actually living that or not, but there is that underlying theme, I think. And there's a certain optimism of like, hey, but these are the small things that are actually really significant that make us human. And McCarthy doesn't really have that.
No.
I think he's a lot more cynical
Yeah.
than
Mm.
Steinbeck.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I feel like there were certain moments of humanity, of showing that kindness, that softer side of humanity in
Yeah.
Steinbeck's, at least in the one book I read, and therefore maybe eliciting a sense of hope. Whereas with McCarthy, it's pretty bleak. And yet at the same time, I feel like McCarthy writes some of the most beautiful passages too. Some of the
Mhm.
most beautiful descriptions of nature. I know in Blood Meridian,
Yeah.
I was completely inspired by the way that he captured the feeling of the desert. I felt like I was there in the desert. And that's something that's very special to me personally because I grew up in the Southwest and I grew up very closely connected to the desert and appreciating the beauty of it and looking at it for a long amount of time or traveling through it, hiking through it, and just noticing. If you start to really pay attention when you're there, you can start to notice all of this vivid imagery, all these colors, all these textures. And it's a rough, hostile place. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, there's a lot of beauty to it. And I feel like he was able to capture both. And
Yeah.
whereas most authors that I've read, when they describe the desert, I've enjoyed a lot of various desert settings in literature, but I feel like most of what you get are sand dunes and,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit of fauna and flora here and there, but McCarthy, he will give you so much variation, and I don't know how he does it. He brings up so much rich variation, and it's not just a vivid, beautiful description or accurate description of the desert, but it's also artistic, almost like the way a photographer would look at a certain viewpoint of the way the scraggles of the trees of like some pecan trees would look against the skies and find how it almost looks psychedelic in a way and take the picture
Yeah.
of that. That's organically happening in the setting. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the way McCarthy is able to zoom in on those little details. It's just
And you can see and kind of
Great.
feel the spectrum of color. Like that Blood Meridian is a book where I think of it and I actually think I'm left with a sense of color and a sort of a black to red to orange color palette that just is present throughout the whole book, and it creates the atmosphere. Like that is what creates the atmosphere of that
I've
book.
been saying for a while, since I read Blood Meridian, I've been saying that I think Blood Meridian, honestly, is the most atmospheric book I've ever read. I think it is the
Yeah.
most atmospheric.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's profound in that way.
Yeah. I love atmospheric stuff. I like, and it's sort of indescribable in the moment, but you know the sort of feeling you have when you read it. And you're just left with like either picturing the color or picturing not even a landscape, but maybe even just, oh, that is what would be in my immediate surroundings if I was there, and this is the color palette that I would see if I was there. And I know that some of my favorite like crime books are like that too, that they leave me with a sort of a sense of a very distinct sense of place.
Yes.
That's what I enjoy kind of most in certain crime books, actually. With I don't know if many people would feel the same, but and I know at least on Fantasy BookTube nobody talks about that, but there are certain like crime thrillers or whatever that people would, of course, sort of dismiss, but I think do a lot with descriptions of landscapes and atmosphere and surroundings that are not 1,000 pages long. So it's like it's shorter but effective.
But with those landscapes and that atmosphere becoming a character and becoming like a reflection, but also an influence or a contrast to the characters and to the story. Like, I haven't read Blood Meridian. I read All the Pretty Horses in September, and like what I remember about it is the feeling of reading it. But just hearing you talk about Blood Meridian and knowing what I know about the book and about how dark and brutal it gets, it's so interesting that you're talking about the beauty of the descriptions and the passages and the landscape and the atmosphere, because it probably wouldn't be as good as of a book if that wasn't there to contrast what is actually happening and what he's, having the characters do. I love what you said about the desert, Joanna. I'm from the south of Spain, so not as like deep desert as like you'd have in the US or in Mexico and like in that region, but a very similar
arid
color palette to like Southern California. So a lot of cactuses, and like when you fly there, you look out the window and it's like brown and olive greens and like that kind of, and yellow. There's the forests look very different, like, but it's beautiful. I find it beautiful. Like, and I think in a lot of fantasy you get that medieval European setting that's very Central European or British, and it's very green.
Irish.
And it's well, Irish is actually not that much of a setting in fantasy. That's why I didn't call it out.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't. I don't know why. There's so much rich Celtic mythology here, but everybody always brings up the Welsh Celtic mythology.
Yeah. Well, you need to write it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. Except for John Gwynne, actually. John Gwynne brought in.
Yeah.
And I think. And Shauna Lawless, of course. Well, that's historical.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
But anyway, there's beauty in in an arid landscape. That's green, and there's variety and there's life. So yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it would always break my heart because I grew up and I started to really connect with that as I got older. But then I made friends when I was, I guess, in college, who were coming from other states that were far more lush and green. And they didn't see it. They were like, it's just dirty. It's just boring. Like that's all they saw. And it made me realize, aren't you really like looking? And I feel like McCarthy, he really got it. He really looked closely. And not only that, I have a lot of family that's in northern Mexico. So McCarthy kind of hits a very tender, special, personal side for me because I have a lot of family. A lot of my family lives in northern Mexico in Chihuahua. And so I've been to Chihuahua several times. My dad grew up there, and he actually refers to very specific locations where my dad grew up, including very small towns. I was just blew my mind. And he gets it. He gets it. Even though those books, like All the Pretty Horses and Blood Meridian, there is some very dark and bleak content, almost I would say absurd at times. Like it's how graphic and disgusting it gets pretty disgusting at times, honestly. But at the same time, I feel like when he's coming across certain peoples and interacting with the culture and the mixture between Spanish and English, I feel like he really gets the nuances of the cultures. Like especially for those time periods that he's writing from too. And just even just talking about it brought up a lot of conversation with my mom and my dad And I felt like, wow, I feel like I'm looking into my history here. It was so surreal, but also very special,
Yeah.
and intimate in that way.
Yeah. And I think often a lot of people would stay away from reading things that are very close to home. I often find that with people that read, they don't want to read something that is too close to home, like geography wise or culture wise, that which I guess is absolutely fine. And probably I don't do that much myself, but when you do and it hits different.
It's kind of the way, I also have a theory about this, like, but it's kind of the way when you travel, you go see all these touristy places, but in your own
Yeah.
home, you often haven't gone to like see the museums or whatever, because unless somebody visits you. But my theory, and we talked about this with crime, because of so many like crime books being, or because of atmospheric crime being like almost a subgenre at this point. But I think often we notice that there's a lot of crime writers that are very known for their location.
Yeah.
And then we look them up and they're not actually from that place, but they moved there, have been living there for a long time. And my theory is that not always, but often you appreciate more what it is that makes a place what it is when you're not born and raised.
You're a little bit removed.
When you're a bit removed, but maybe you moved there as an older person and you have a comparison, but you still love it and you fall in love with it, but you know what you're falling in love with. Or if you left and come back and you gain that appreciation because you realize what you missed.
Yeah.
Whereas if you see it every day, it's just that is the norm. That is what you have learned is just natural and there's a word that I'm looking for that I can't think of, but anyway, like the normal, right? And then everything else you just compare to, it's familiar. Yeah, it's warmer, it's colder, it's greener, it's drier, whatever it is. So it makes sense to me that somebody who has like a comparison would be almost better at capturing exactly what that is and what it feels like. And then you read it and there's something so special about somebody having captured exactly what you see.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's also a thing of, when you leave home, you love home more.
Yeah.
And so in my region of Spain, I'm from Galicia, which is the northwest. It's that bit above Portugal.
It's the only green part.
It's the only green part of Spain. But we have a word for that feeling. So there is a word, it's like a nostalgia for your home when you leave it. There is a specific word for that, and it's called Moriña.
Moriña. I'm going to write that down.
Morin with the thing. A.
Tilde. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Moriña. And it's like when you leave home, you become more nostalgic for all the things you didn't see when you were there.
Yes, I know that feeling totally. Yeah.
And it's not homesickness. It's just it's I guess more positive than homesickness. Yeah.
I totally feel that. That's what I feel when I read McCarthy, and I think it's special to me because I grew up, in a certain culture in that area, and then I've moved. I no longer live there. I live in the South in the United States now, and it's so different here. The culture, everything. There's nothing like that. It feels almost like the way that I grew up almost feels exotic compared to what is around me now. And so when I was reading McCarthy, I was like, oh wow. It just kind of brought me back in a way that I wasn't expecting. It kind of felt like I was reading into my roots in a way, at the same time as I was reading this very horrific story with Blood Meridian and even All the Pretty Horses, pretty horrific stuff. But still, I was very moved again by those things that he was able to draw upon. And it made me excited. It didn't make it made me excited that I could talk with Jimmy, for example, or anybody here who has read McCarthy, and maybe they didn't grow up where I grew up and they don't know it the way that I do, but it's just exciting to be able to say, this is really what it's like, or just to be able to speak to it on that level and to connect with others who are experiencing it in a different way, experiencing it as an, something that might be unfamiliar or new to them.
Yeah. He is very good at, like, I guess, respecting the melting pot of culture that is
Yeah.
in that location.
Mhm.
And I also really, really appreciate that he doesn't bother translating the Spanish dialogue that he has scattered throughout the books.
Mhm.
Which of course is handy being a native Spanish speaker, but like even if I wasn't, I would still appreciate that, it just, there's an authenticity to it that is
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
I love that too. I love that too. I'm going to catch up in the chat because I'm sorry, you all in the chat. I've been getting pretty far behind. Derry says there's an author I love who writes paranormal romance fantasy and often sets her stories in different regions: Morocco, India, China. It's wonderful.
Nice.
Very few characters are white.
I'm instantly interested especially in a fantasy, if it's a fantasy that draws from a different culture that isn't like your traditional medieval Europe, I'm instantly interested. Because like fantasy has such a great opportunity to draw from mythology and history and just adapt it and tweak it and like, have the magic be inspired by it. And we just don't get enough of it, and there's so much more variety now. I love that. But yeah, cool.
It is. It's really wonderful. We're living in a golden age of fantasy, as Ida Philip always says that, but it's true. And then Evie had to go. Going to have to drop so I can have dinner. It was great seeing you all. Carlos, I can't wait to read more Steinbeck with you. Yolanda, can't wait to read more Enriquez with you. And so thank you so much, Evie, for dropping by. I think she wanted to stop in for a second and I felt bad, but we were just in such a flow with things. But I am really grateful to see her in the chat. And going on here, I'm going to skip ahead. Sorry, I have to skip some stuff. I guess I kind of got lost in some of the chat here. Good morning from
That's a
Australia.
difficult thing to navigate. Like we did one live stream and it was difficult to keep up with the chat, and we didn't even have that many people.
We did two. The first one was
you did? Yeah.
me and Amanda, and there was like 8 people, and I still couldn't keep up with the chat.
Yeah. Well, I don't, yeah. And I think the chat is understanding that, it's going to be a back and forth. And sometimes I'm going to have to skip ahead, but I do appreciate that you all are there and hopefully responding to one another too. So that's always wonderful and welcome. And it says here, good morning from Australia. So I was in
G'day.
Australia over the summer and it's
Nice.
just wild to be there on a different, I'm sure it's that way for you all too, in a different time zone. But for me, like chatting with Nuts happens at 7 p.m. at night, 7:30 p.m. at night. And it was Saturday morning and chatting with Nuts was on. And I was like, wow, it's like happening in the morning here.
Yeah, Australia is just so far away. I don't think I can fathom how far away.
They live in the future.
They live in the future. So do we, in a way.
We actually do.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I love as well about BookTube, and I mean that's true about any internet community, but this being such a welcoming and lovely one, just how all over the place we are. Like I love that. Yeah, like we're chatting with Nuts, and there's like 7 different time zones.
Yeah.
I can't watch it live because my bedtime is like 10 p.m.
Oh yeah, I totally understand that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, chatting with Nuts is always 1 a.m. I always catch the first hour because it's a Friday. I'll stay up till 1 a.m. That's cool. But after that.
Oh, and it looks like Jimmy is still here in the chat. I would love to hear, if you all are okay, what you learned from the month of Jimmy. If you can identify themes from that.
Actually, speaking of atmosphere, Jimmy likes atmosphere because I think all of the books that I read had a very distinct sense of place and
the psychology of the month of question. Yes.
Yeah.
Atmosphere.
I mean, it's not quite as deep as what you said about Alan in like a sentence and a half. That was very well put.
Well, there's always a very prominent sense or awareness of mortality in the books that Jimmy likes. which I think he's very aware of himself.
But I think morality as well.
Morality, yeah.
Just in terms of what? Where am I going?
Well, in terms of shining a light, or not shining a light, holding up a mirror to society and saying, this is all the bad stuff that we do.
Asking some difficult questions and not necessarily giving answers, I think.
Yeah.
I could totally see what you're saying. Just really quickly, the word that's coming to my mind is accountability. Would you say that might be a word that could align with what you're saying?
For sure. And the fact that humanity or society doesn't take accountability quite often for the bad things that we do.
I think a lot of the books that I read in the month of Jimmy left me thinking about them a lot, because they weren't giving me answers. An immediate one that comes to mind is Kindred, which was an amazing, incredible book, and that presents you with a situation and with characters and with decisions that are made and with some questions about nature versus nurture and how far can empathy stretch. And it doesn't give you answers necessarily. It doesn't tell you where you're supposed to land. So then you finish the book, and I was just trying to figure out where I land, and I'm still trying to figure that out. And I had that reaction to most books I read that month. I have not stopped thinking about The Darkness That Comes Before. I have not stopped thinking about Fever Dream, and all of them for slightly different reasons. But I think they're all kind of presenting the reader with humanity, some dark parts of humanity, but also a contrast to that, but just not really passing judgment, and letting you pass that judgment and think about it. And all very, very interesting. I think you could say, like, on a more surface level, oh, they're like relatively dark and, like some exploration of maybe bad people and sad and death, and we mentioned death a couple of times in our videos, but I think that's, reductive, because it's not. I don't think, oh, Jimmy likes these books because they're dark. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's probably more accurate to say that they're thought-provoking, and not just dark in an ugly way, but dark in an interesting way, in a beautiful way. There's a lot of beauty in Kindred, even though it's one of the saddest, most frustrating books that I have ever read. But it didn't leave me feeling only negative things. It left me feeling hopeful towards, there are good people in the most horrific situations.
Yeah, Station 11 was like that too. It's a melancholy book. It is sort of in despair about where we're going with things, but there are always going to be those few people that want to keep the light going, I guess, I think that was pretty prevalent throughout some of those books that we read in the month.
That's amazing. I love that. That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny because I was actually sharing a very similar thought about the dark stuff last night with Jimmy, because I think at one point in time, I would have described my taste as, I like grim dark because I want the stakes to be high, and you know what I mean? And then I don't feel like that would be a pitch for me to read a book nowadays. It's not that I don't enjoy dark books. I think if you see the majority of books I read, they're on the dark side. But I don't think that that's why I'm reading them. Like I need a purpose behind things. It needs to serve a purpose. And I especially love that about what you said, Yolanda, about Octavia Butler's Kindred, because she doesn't tell you what to think or feel. And that's my favorite approach to theme. I, by the way, just want to say really quickly to anybody who's watching and to you too as well, Secret Sauce of Storycraft, who was here in the chat earlier, did a video of Octavia Butler, Where to Start. But
Yes.
really, it's an incredible tribute video to Octavia Butler, her life, her legacy, the books that she has written, all the books she's written. So I highly recommend everyone check it out because it's a
Nice.
phenomenal video.
Cool. I'll watch that. Yeah, I was left wanting to read anything that she's written.
Yeah. I've only read Kindred, just to answer this question, but Secret Sauce of Storycraft actually recommends a different place to start with Octavia Butler, and she actually explains her stance on Kindred, which is interesting. I'll just give away, it's not her favorite, and she, you know, I challenge you to watch that video and not want to read everything that Octavia Butler has written.
Cool.
What an
Cool.
incredible writer! What an incredible career, and probably not recognized enough.
For sure. Yeah. And one of those writers that writes with incredible subtlety and depth, and yet makes it feel effortless. You're reading it and it's so seemingly simple, and yet I could never do it. And
Yeah.
a lot of people could never do it. It's so impressive.
Kindred is a masterpiece, and it means a lot to me when I hear people who don't live or who haven't grown up in the US to love that book, because some of my favorite books are time travel books, but I specifically like Kindred and 11/22/63 by Stephen King. Those are some of my favorites, but I'm always hesitant to recommend them because if the person hasn't lived in the US or from the US, I'm always like, I don't know if that's going to appeal to that reader as much. I could be proven wrong, but I think that speaks to just how well Octavia Butler writes, that you two got so much out of the. Did you read it too, Carlos, or was it just?
No, I didn't read Kindred. I didn't get to Kindred. No.
I highly recommend it. It's so good, but I
Yeah.
think it speaks a lot to how well written that story is.
For sure.
What you're saying, Yolanda, and it was written in the 70s, but I feel like it's timeless. I feel like it could still be applicable today in a lot of ways.
Definitely. And I think because it's a book that is obviously about the US, like it's, a very specific period in history, and obviously set in the US, but the message of it is universal, and that message of, like nature versus nurture, and how people are to each other, what people are capable of doing to each other, what people are capable of accepting because they're exposed to it enough, and all of these questions are universal and have happened throughout history in different forms, everywhere. So yeah, it definitely speaks to her as a writer, that it doesn't feel like an American book. Does that make sense? Like, even though it obviously is, like, just a comparison that comes to mind is To Kill a Mockingbird. I love To Kill a Mockingbird, but To Kill a Mockingbird feels more specifically, this is about race in the US. Whereas Kindred felt more universal. Like, obviously it's about racism and slavery and what that does to people, to society, but I feel like the way she brought theme into it was just so masterful.
Yes, I totally agree. Oh, I love that book so much. Oh, you're speaking so well about it. So I need to go ahead and wrap this up. My dog is knocking on my door. I think she wants a walk and some dinner. But this has been so lovely. It's so lovely to get to talk with you too. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today for Why Read.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, this has been really cool. We'll have to have you on our channel at some point. When we do a month of Joanna.
Month of Joanna. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you need to send us a list of books, however many you want. We'll pick a selection from that list, and yeah.
I'll try really hard not to cross over with Jimmy because he does a lot of books I would have chosen, but I'll do my best. Thank you guys so much, and thank you everyone in the chat. It was so wonderful to see all the interaction. You all are wonderful, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day. So thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.